History is stranger than fiction. You'd never guess that the story behind this humble roadside notice at Stapleton, near Pontefract in Yorkshire, is studded with famous names, including the great social rebels of the age that ended with the First World War, notably Tolstoy, Gorky, Lenin, Ruskin, Shaw. The people who live in the little community behind this notice board call it their pulpit. Theirs is the smallest church in the world because they are its only members. They've no building for worship, though once there were 4 centres of the Brotherhood Church in London. They have no dogma. They hold no services. In fact, in the ordinary sense of the word, the Brotherhood Church is not a church, but a way of life, and one which has sent its members, and could do so again, to prison. The people who live in this little community are very gentle, but very determined rebels against the government, the state. They don't hate the state. They simply refuse to recognize its authority. These survivors have achieved a viable community. Alfred Higgins, the Yorkshireman who gave up a school teaching job to settle here and live his Christian principles, keeps bees on a scale that gives him and his wife a standard of living they are content with. Their daughter Hilda, who trained in farm work, is chiefly responsible for the market gardening. She gets help when she needs it, chiefly from her husband Len, a southerner who makes his living repairing farm machines. The Brotherhood Church was founded in 1894. It sprang from an organization called the Fellowship of the New Life, one of many societies formed at that time by intellectual rebels against the soulless drudgery and exploitation and selfish materialism of a booming industrial society. The fellowship fostered self-governing, self-supporting communities based on the land. The first and probably the most important was at Purley in Essex. There were others. This one, started by a fellowship group from Leeds, was founded in 1921. Once there were 20 members here. Today there are only 4. Life was hard for the first brothers. They had to build their own homes, and pretty primitive some of them were. They drew their water from a well. And like so many simple life community pioneers from the cities, they found that growing things is a skilled job. This is a Christian community of people who try to live by the teaching of the Sermon on the Mount. God's authority, they say, is the only authority they recognize. And holding that this rule has no qualifications, they have refused, at the price of prison sometimes, to carry out obligations imposed by secular authority. They refuse to register births, marriages, deaths, to answer census questions, to acknowledge local regulations, to serve in the armed forces, to accept compulsory education, or, on the other hand, to accept any help from the state. Hilda, you have no official existence at all, isn't that so? Your birth wasn't registered?
No, my birth was never registered, though I was born in a hospital, so there is some record of it.
Are you sorry about that? Would you rather there was no record?
No, I'm not worried either way. I managed to get a passport when I wanted to go to some conference abroad a few years ago, in spite of the fact I had no birth certificate.
Now, you know, you are different from other people. Did you feel this when you were a girl?
Well, as a child, I didn't go to school till I was 13. My father taught me. We didn't really accept the state system of schools. We think it brings in the militaristic ideas and all sorts of other ideas which aren't relevant to a child learning the 3 R's. And if a child learns the 3 R's when it's young, it's enough later to start learning the other things when it starts thinking.
Have you ever felt any doubt about any points?
Well, as I say, the only doubts I had were the fact that we had hardly enough mixing with other children when we were young children.
But on more general grounds, no doubts?
Oh, no, no, no.
But could a whole large community, a whole society live as you're living?
Eventually, perhaps the world will see the light and change to a more Christian attitude.
Mrs. Higgins, as a wife and mother, you must have found, surely, that the kind of life you and your husband chose made things a little more difficult sometimes.
Yes, it undoubtedly did, but it's been well worth it. You see, we've had a lot of different people living with us, and we've got quite a lot out of it.
You don't regret any of it, eh?
None of the essentials, no.
What are the inessentials that you do regret?
Oh, well, I was only thinking of mistakes one's made in personal relations and things like that, but broadly speaking, I do not regret.
Must have been pretty hard going at the beginning when you had no house to come to. Where did you live to start with?
Well, when the first house was pulled down, we lived in a hen house. It sounds rather bad, but actually it was as big as a caravan and wasn't much different from a lot of people living in a caravan.
Your daughter Hilda, I see, firmly believes in what you believe in. What about your two sons? Did they follow
only
that?
one son.
One son. Did he follow you?
Well, he isn't living the life we live, so he obviously doesn't. But I'm satisfied that he's a man of integrity, and he's a good man, and that is what counts in life, isn't it?
I believe, Mr. Higgins, you had your first trouble with the law over a matter of conscience when you were jailed as a conscientious objector in the First World War.
Well, yes, that's rather a long time ago. Actually, I didn't spend long in jail. The army pushed me out because I wasn't physically fit for it. But my brother and my wife's brother had over 2 years in jail.
Indeed. Was it this experience, you think, that led you to join this movement?
Well, I was a conscientious objector before I came into contact with this movement. I was actually teaching near Doncaster, and had joined the Doncaster No Conscription Fellowship. And then we had area meetings in Leeds, and that's where I came across Tom Ferris, who was the leader of this movement in 1916 or 1915. And I was so impressed with the logic of his position that I went into it further and decided that that was the position I was going to take up in future.
The logic of his position?
Yes,
on what points?
On Christian grounds.
What points are you thinking of chiefly?
On the teaching of the Sermon on the Mount, particularly.
Now, what had you to do to get yourself settled in? You had to build
I had to build a house. And I built a house to suit myself, which the local authority admitted would have passed if I'd asked their permission to build. But I wasn't asking their permission to build. It wasn't their house. And they were bent upon enforcing whether it was right, morally right or wrong. They were bent on enforcing their authority. We had to toe the line, and we said we're not going to toe the line.
Well, this is really, I would have thought, you see, that compassion for embarrassed officials would have overruled principle.
Embarrassed officials, they should look after their own embarrassment and listen to their inner voice of conscience, which would tell them that it's wrong to do injury to people who have not offended against any moral law. We may take a stand on the moral law, not the coercive law, which they are supposed to administer. And the question of rates came up. We had refused to pay them until they acknowledged that they'd been in the wrong.
One moment, did you stop using the water? And
we don't have any water. We have no facilities from them at all.
Oh.
We had our own water, our own sewage system, everything.
I see.
Our own light. We didn't use anything. They didn't even collect our dustbin.
Are you disappointed, Mr. Higgins, in the way this community has dwindled now to 4 people?
Well, I would have liked some younger people to come along, but I'm getting on myself. I'm nearly 70, and but I could, so long as I'm able to carry on with my work, I'm quite happy about it.
Time may change methods and means, but it will be a melancholy age that never produces people like these, who, for reasons that seem imperative to them, refuse to conform.